Hi, hello. In this new episode of Vertex with Diego, I'm gonna show you this new cool tool called AutoMLOps and how we can use it to deploy pipelines easier in Vertex. So this tool was developed by Google. It's not an officially supported product, but they have a team working on it, and it's fairly good. The documentation is fairly comprehensive. And so what we're gonna be doing today is I'm gonna be running one of their demos, their the introduction during an example here, but instead of using a notebook, I'm gonna be running it locally and in a way that feels closer to what might be what you may do in the project. Um, we're gonna go through this as we go. Basically, what they do behind the scenes is they generate automatically a lot of the components that we saw how to create in previous videos. So they would create Docker images, they would create pipeline files, they will automatically write scripts to allocate all the resources in Vertex. The things we did, okay, we need to create this bucket, we need to create this artifact registry. They would do that all automatically and then upload everything. So these are all the services that they provision. It's quite comprehensive, as you can see. And then when it comes to deployments, what we usually do is using the cloud build option. Whenever we upload new version of our code to the source repo, it triggers a build. This build basically updates the components, compiles the pipeline, and then we basically need to wait for that build to occur. And once that build occurs, it triggers the pipeline, then the pipeline runs, the pipeline deploys the endpoint, and then we have the endpoint that we can play with it. So that's what we are going to be doing today. So the first step, it's going to be to create a data set. So let me go ahead and do this for us. I already have it ready. So what we need to do here is simply add a new data set from a local file. Let me select here. This is in almost here, Vertex AutoMLOps, and this is this preprocessed CSV. I'm gonna go ahead and create a new dataset. We're gonna call it test dataset. I'm just gonna go ahead, select it. This is gonna be dry beans because this dataset is all about beans, and then we're gonna go auto detect, and that should be perfect. So while we do that, I mean, that was ready, very easy. So now we can forget it and go back to our console. So let's look at the files that we have today to work with. We have 4 files here: functions, infra, preproc, and test. So what do we have on functions? Here we have 3 functions, sorry. The first one that creates a dataset, and this is very similar to what we did previously. We have a function that gets a query like this, and then we have a function that generates a data frame from this, and then the data frame is parsed and it's stored as in a bucket. So basically, this whole function, what it does is it grabs a table from BigQuery and it dumps it as a CSV in cloud storage. Actually, this we just did. I did it separately. So this is already done. We don't need it. Should make our code slightly easier. Then when it comes to train the model, what we can see here is that we get a path. We load the dataset from the path. We basically do basic training functions. We get the labels. We split between train and test. We run train a decision model, score it, and then write the model. You might see here that we do all the imports within the functions, and this looks very strange, but that's a requirement that the AutoMLOps library has. that we actually need to build all the imports inside, because they're gonna take all this code and use it to generate the dockers, and they need to know which imports are needed. And so that's why it's really important to keep all these dependencies inside the function, and also some auxiliary functions. I haven't tested as much on how much you can push it by, for example, writing this code separately and then writing as an import. I might do a follow-up video with more information in that regard. And finally, we have this function that deploys our models. So what we can see here is that we get a list of models. If the model exists, then we're gonna use the base parent model, and if the model doesn't exist, then we're gonna use a new one. And then we use the actual GCP's API to upload the model, and then once the model is done, to upload an endpoint based on the model. And here we can define many characteristics of the machine and the endpoint, as we did earlier manually. So just these 2 lines is pretty much our whole previous video on how to create a model, like a pipeline, and deploy it. And this is simply checking that things work as expected. So that's function. Then we have infrastructure. And here what we do is we are wrapping. So here we have a bunch of general definitions. We have our project ID, we have the model ID, the path to the training dataset, and here this is important because this refers back to this here refers back to the dataset we just created, so that's necessary. The target column that is used for training, etc. So what we do here is twofold. First, we wrap this component that's part of the AutoMLOps package. This is a decorator, so if you look at their examples, they actually put all this together, and they use this to define components. We are keeping this separate because I think it looks slightly cleaner. We have nothing related to AutoMLOps in the previous file, so basically we do all the AutoMLOps in this one. As you can see, we need to specify the packages that are needed to execute each component. Each function will be a component, and here we use the create dataset function. We're going to use the same thing for training model. For the deploy model, this is basically defining the different components as we did before using DSL and Kubeflow. And so here we define the pipeline. This is very similar to what we did in the previous video. This pipeline has 3 steps. It creates a dataset, it trains the model, and it deploys the model. And finally here we have some pipeline parameters. And so all these are general definitions, and this is where we actually start doing things with code, and so we're going to run through this together. So basically this is what we need to execute. Finally, there's one more file. This is the test file, and this is, as the name suggests, simply for testing. What we're going to be doing here is once everything is done, once we have trained, deployed the model and the endpoint, we are going to use the endpoint to generate some predictions and test them locally, just to make sure that everything is running fine. Okay, so let's get started. As I mentioned before, the only thing that we need to execute is this infra part. So let's go ahead and run this, and let's see what errors we get, because we should always get errors. Otherwise, we're not doing things live enough. I hate when this happens. This is okay. So I need to install Google Cloud AutoMLOps. This makes sense. Let's follow installation here. I think this is just Google Cloud AutoMLOps. Perfect. So let's exit here. we're also gonna need AI platform, so let's go ahead and install that. Google Cloud installs usually follow this pattern, so that was easy. Let me just go ahead and install it as well. And then from looking at this, we probably don't need anything else. All right, so let's go ahead and let's bring this back. Imports should be okay. This could not be resolved. It's probably because yeah. That should be better. Okay. As you know by now, this loves to hang up on the first one, but that should be better. Okay. Now we're rolling. Okay, that was strange. Okay, so now everything's working. Let's go ahead and I haven't properly configured Beam yet, so you can see that I'm just jumping around in a way that I shouldn't. Let's find this. Define this. Okay, so we basically just run through the definitions, and now we're actually gonna use AutoMLOps tool. So the first step is this: we're gonna generate, and what this does is basically, as you can see here, it writes directories under AutoMLOps. So let me open here another terminal. So this is streaming Vertex AutoMLOps. Okay, and so you can see that now we actually got this directory AutoMLOps, where the library generated a lot of code. Let me hit in, and we can see here, for example, if we go into components, we have for each one of these datasets, for example this one, we have this component that defines it in terms of, for example, the image that it will be using. This image, as you can see, is part of my project, and this image is defined as the base component. And if we go back and we go to this base component, we can see that it uses Python, installs some libraries, and these libraries are defined, as you can see, from the list of packages that I had to install. So that's regarding components. If we go a little bit back farther, we can see, for example, pipelines. And here we can see, for example, how they actually define the pipeline. Similar to what we did last time using DSL. So basically, instead of us having to write all this, they do it for us automatically, and they automatically also upload the pipeline. So we should not worry about this AutoMLOps folder. This is all done for us. We need to know that it's there because that's what's happening behind the hood, but the library allows us to not have to write all that code. The next step is to provision. So here we're gonna start creating some of these services and um, basically uploading images, creating buckets. As you can see, for example, I tried to create a bucket. I couldn't find it, so it's creating it. It's checking the Vertex, the service account, and adding the proper services to it. So a lot of things that we would have to do manually, like clicking around, they're being done automatically by Vertex. It's deploying functions automatically, so this is really, really useful. And this is gonna set up pretty much everything that we need, so that when we deploy, when we deploy, what we're gonna do is we're gonna push code to the repository. That code is gonna trigger a build that was created using this, and that's gonna start cascading everything that we need. So let me go to Vertex and show you some of the things this has created. So for example, if we come to cloud storage, you can see that this was created right now. So it's 3:42 p.m. And so these two buckets were created. See, automatically created this bucket, and we can see, well, let's see what it says inside. Then we might also go to the artifact registry. And here we can see that we have this artifact registry with two different images that as well were created right now, just now. So all that is happening while this code runs. So pretty much building everything so that once we start iterating and pushing code, everything should be working flawlessly for us. Right, so we see, for example, the cloud scheduler that it was here. We had this pattern here that says it retrains every Sunday at midnight. And so we can come here to the cloud scheduler, and we can see that it actually created a schedule. So that's good. Let's so if you look here, this run one build, probably to generate the Docker images. Now let's run the last step, which is deploy. And so it's checking that it has all the permissions that it needed. It initialized a repository, and so you can see here it actually worked as I mentioned. It transformed the folder into a Git repository. It pushed all the code into GCP, and that is actually gonna build. It's gonna trigger the new build. So we can follow this process now in GCP. You see here we have this new build that was triggered. This was manually triggered by the library, but this is actually an automatic trigger that happens whenever there's a push into the repository. And as you can see from the history, and some attempts I did before recording this, it takes about 6 minutes. So that's something we're gonna have to wait for. And so once that's done, what it's gonna do is gonna trigger our pipeline. As we can see, there's no runs here. um, and so that should happen automatically once that's done. So we should be able to follow um, the progress in Cloud Build. While we wait, we can keep on looking here at some of these configurations in the AutoMLOps folder. So if we look, for example, at configs, we see a lot of the things we defined, the location, the pipelines. So basically this is some metadata that it's using. We also have images. Here there's nothing. Model monitoring. We have the script. That is in charge of building a monitoring pipeline. And as you can see, there's a little bit of code here, almost 300 lines. And the idea is that this is something we might want to do if we were to deploy something for ourselves in Vertex, and all that is done automatically by this library. So then we have scripts, and this is a collection of scripts that are useful for example, building components. And so we can see here that it submits a build to build some of these Docker images. That's probably the one that it built earlier that we saw that had finished. We have a run pipeline, for example, again, that runs pipelines when we upload things there. All right, so that's has taken 4 minutes so far, and if the path is indicative, in 2 minutes we should be good to go. Unfortunately, the next step after this is to run the pipeline. The pipeline is fairly fast, except that it deploys a model, and we have seen in previous videos that deploying models usually takes a little bit, and so we can expect the last step to take a while. We can go maybe to the library here. There's a list of examples, so we're using the basic one. They also have one without a notebook, and then some examples, for example, using TensorFlow transfer learning, using a GPU, using BigQuery, both examples of batch and online. As you can see, there's a lot of options on this library. So we are currently using most of the defaults, but we could use GitHub Actions instead of Cloud Build. I'm probably gonna record a video doing that in the upcoming weeks. Now it uses Kubeflow pipelines, but it's probably gonna be adding some more later. One of the things that I definitely gonna be trying next is to use GitHub as the source repository, because right now it's using where's this? What's the name? That's something I don't use, cloud source repositories. Here, we're here. Um, Here in cloud build, we have the source repository. You can see it here. We change branch to the AutoMLOps, and basically here we have the same scripts and the same code we have locally, because this is basically what it push. You can see git ignore here. These are the things we are not pushing. Let's see if there's something. So the config local is not push. The image folder was empty, so I don't think it's pushing that as well. But as you can see, this is getting deprecated, and so they actually mentioned that they're going to be deprecating this soon, and so definitely GitHub is going to be a lot nicer. Also because if this is your project that you're using, you probably might be using GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket, and so just keeping all your code on the platform you're already using is definitely something we would want. Let's go back here to our builds. Okay, this is done. So the fact that it's done means that we can go now to our Vertex pipelines, and remember that before we saw nothing here. Now we have a pipeline. We can open it. It has 4 steps. The first one is creating the dataset. As we know, this step is fairly simple. The next one is train the model. Again, this step should also be fairly straightforward. And finally, deploy the model, which is an easy step, but we know it takes a little bit. So we might cut the recording there and come back once that's done. But before we do that, I definitely want to emphasize how convenient this library is. I would say that it's always good to go around and click things, especially when you're new to a platform and you want to get better at it and you need to understand it. It might give you a better sense of where things are and why things are happening. And that's also why we had the previous 2 videos. But when you're actually deploying models into production, and when you need to do this repeatedly, when you need to change things and make sure that all the changes are propagated to the right places, having infrastructure as a code is definitely very beneficial. And this is one of the best libraries to just manage your whole Vertex end-to-end pipelines. So definitely something very positive going for this library. As you saw, creating the dataset didn't took that long. We are currently training the model, and once it's done, then we're gonna go to deploy the model, and we're pretty much gonna be done by then. So the last thing we're gonna be doing once we deploy the model is simply test that it works. And so what we're gonna do for that is we're gonna come here, back to our terminal, and if you remember, we had 3 files. So we have our last file here in test. And what this file does is it basically loads the endpoint. So we need a deployed endpoint. It searches for the last one. It gets the data. We again don't need this anymore. And it calls the endpoint. So this is very simple. This is just checking that things work. We're probably gonna stop here once, because this is gonna take forever. I might edit this later and add it. I might not. We'll see. So thanks for joining, and looking forward to our next adventure in Vertex. All right. So welcome back. As you can see, the pipeline run finished. It took 22 minutes overall, and this particular step, the deploy model, took 19 minutes, so always something to consider. In comparison, training the model took almost 2 minutes. The same for creating the dataset. So now that we have our endpoint deployed, you can actually go back, and if we go to Vertex, we can look at our models here. Model registry, we see our model, and if we come to deploy and test, we see that there's an endpoint active. Awesome. So now let's use this test script to test our model. What we're gonna do here is we're gonna run these imports. Again, this is the test file. It's always takes a little bit, but should be up and running soon enough. I'm a bit impatient, so let's do this one by one. Okay, yeah, scikit-learn, again, whenever it's the first time that it's imported, it takes a little bit. There it goes. Should be function definition done. And so let's get this. If we filter the endpoints, we actually get one there. And so we can select it and show it. There we go. And now we can get our data. Let me show you very quickly what this data looks like. Again, if there are no errors, it's not a real demo. So let's run this. Well, let's do Python and some. Let's go again. Import everything. Get our endpoint, and let's see if this works now. Getting our data frame. Basically, this is just reading from. Let me show it again. So here we have all the features and the class at the end. This is what we're trying to predict. We're gonna load some samples, and we're gonna call the endpoint, which generate a prediction. Let's look at the prediction, and let's look at this. That's a very well performing model. Surprisingly well. But again, the goal today is not getting these models as good as possible, but rather to get all the infrastructure around them. And so now we can come into the model here, and we can look at some of the predictions, and we can see some predictions here. This is probably what we just did in the last hour. So again, this shows how to use the AutoMLOps platform. If you haven't started, the folks at Google have been doing a great job implementing this, and looking forward to using this tool in more videos to show you how to deploy using, for example, GitHub Actions, but also integrating it and using maybe some LLM applications. Stay tuned.